On an island on the edge of an immense sea, there is a city, a forest, and a boy. The city is called Asteri, a perfect city saved by the magic woven into its walls, when a devastating plague swept through the world years before. The forest is called the Barrow, an vast wood of ancient trees that encircles the city and feeds the earth with magic. And the boy is called Oscar, a shop boy for the most powerful magician in the Barrow, who spends his days in the dark cellar of his master's shop, grinding herbs and dreaming of the wizards who once lived on the island. Oscar's world is small, but he likes it that way. The real world is vast, strange, and unpredictable, and Oscar does not quite fit in it. But it's been a long time since anyone who could call himself a wizard walked the world, and now that world is changing. Children in the city are falling ill. Something sinister lurks in the forest. Oscar has long been content to stay in his small room, comforted in the knowledge that the magic that flows from the trees will keep his island safe. Now, even magic may not be enough to save it. My preview today is The Real Boy by Ursu. The residents of the gleaming hilltop town of Asteri called their home simply the city. The residents of the Barrow, the tangle of forest and darkness that encircled the bottom of Asteri's hill like a shadowy moat, called Asteri the Shining City, and those who lived there, the Shining People. The Asterians didn't call themselves anything special because when everyone else refers to you as the Shining People, you really don't have to do it yourself. Massive stone walls towered around the city, almost as tall as the great trees in the forest, and, though you could not tell by looking at them, the walls writhed with enchantments. For protection, the people of the city said. For show, the magic smiths of the Barrow said. After all, it was in the dark of the Barrow where the real magic lie. And indeed, the people of Asteri streamed through the walls and down the tall hill to the shops of the Barrow marketplace, buying potions and salves, charms and wards, spells and pretty little enchanted things. They could not do any magic themselves, but they had magic smiths to do it for them. And really, wasn't that better anyway? The Barrow even had one magic worker so skilled he called himself a magician. Master Caleb was the first magician in a generation, and he helped the Asterians shine even more brightly. He had an apprentice like most magic smiths, but like the wizards of old, he also took on a hand, a young boy from the children's home, to do work too menial for a magician's apprentice. The boy, who was called Oscar, spent most of his time underneath Caleb's shop, tucked in a small room in the cellar, grinding leaves into powders, extracting oils from plants, pouring tinctures into small vials, kept company by the quiet, the dark, the cocoon of a room, and a steady rotation of murmuring cats. It was a good fate for an orphan. Hey, Mouse! Except for one thing. Come out, Mouse! Are you there? At the sound of the apprentice's voice calling down the cellar stairs, a large gray cat picked herself up from the corner and brushed softly against Oscar. It's all right, Oscar whispered. I'll be fine. The cat sprang up and disappeared into the dark. The apprentice's name was Wolf, because sometimes the universe is an unsubtle place. And even now, Oscar sometimes found himself expecting an actual wolf to appear in place of the boy, as if the boy were just a lie they were all telling themselves. Where are you, little rodent? Oscar put down his pestle. He was not a rodent, but that never seemed to stop Wolf from calling him one. I'm here, he called back. Stupid Wolf, as if one could be anywhere else but here. Wolf appeared in the pantry door. He was only 4 years older than Oscar, but almost twice as tall. With his elongated frame, the apprentice seemed all bones and hollows in the lantern light. He looked around the room, dark eyes flicking across the floor. "Where are your little cat friends, Mouse?" "Not here," Oscar said. Like he would tell Wolf. Only Oscar knew the cat's secrets, and he guarded them closely. He knew all their names, he knew the sound of their footfalls, he knew where each of them slept, hid, stalked. He knew which one would visit him at what time of day. The gray cat with the lantern-bright green eyes was Crow, and she liked to come into the pantry in the mornings and nestled in the parchment envelopes. "I don't actually care," Wolf said. He turned his gaze to the towering wall of shelves behind him. "We need some raspberry leaf for a shiner, now." Oscar didn't even have to look. He could see the jars on the pantry shelves just as clearly in his head. "There's none left." Wolf narrowed his eyes, but did not question Oscar. A couple of years ago, the apprentice would have stalked over to the shelves himself to make sure. Except every time he did, he'd discover that Oscar was right. Then he'd get angry and kick Oscar. It worked out better for both of them this way. Wolf scanned the room. "Well, what about that?" He pointed at a jar at Oscar's feet filled with dry, crumbled green leaves. "That's walnut leaves," Oscar said. "It looks the same. Give me 4 packets. "But," Oscar sputtered, chest tightening. How could Wolf think they looked the same? "That's not what they want. It won't work." In fact, the herbs were opposite. Raspberry leaf was to protect a relationship, and walnut leaf was to break one up. But Wolf did not like it when Oscar knew such things. "Oh, it won't work!" Wolf exclaimed, slapping his hands on his forehead. "I had no idea. What would I, apprentice to the Barrow's only true magician, do if it weren't for the cellar mouse to tell me that it won't work?" "Well," Oscar said, "you could always look it up in the library." Wolf's eyes flared. Oscar flinched. He hadn't even been trying to make Wolf angry. All he'd done was answer his question. Wolf took a step closer to Oscar. "Do you even know what a freak you are?" he asked. "There's a reason Caleb keeps you in the basement." His eyes flicked from Oscar to the doorway and back. "Anyway, who cares about the herbs? It's a shiner. She won't know the difference." "But what if she does?" The words popped out of Oscar's mouth before he could stop them. He could not help it. They were fluttering around in his head and needed to get out. Wolf drew himself up. "Look, Mouse," he said, voice carnivorous, "she won't. Shiners want magic to work, and so it works. If you weren't dumb as a goat, you'd know that." Oscar smashed his lips together. If that was true, it was no magic he understood. "You let Caleb and me worry about the customers," Wolf continued. "You can worry about the cats and your little plants and—" But whatever else Oscar had to worry about would remain a mystery, for just then the magician's voice came echoing down into the cellar, calling for Wolf. The apprentice turned, collecting his bones and hollows. "Bring the walnut leaves up as soon as you have them ready," he said as he moved out the door. "And for the love of the wizards," he added, "don't come out into the shop. We want the customers to come back." 5 minutes later, Oscar was creeping into the shop's kitchen, 4 packets of herbs in his hands. They were not walnut leaves. He hadn't had much time, so he'd put together a package of passion flower and verbena, which at least would not cause active harm. From his position in the doorway, he could see Master Caleb leaning across the shop counter, his tree-dark eyes focused on the lady before him, as if they existed for nothing but to behold her. The shining people didn't actually shine, not like a lantern or a firefly or a crystal in the light, but they might as well have. The young lady in front of Caleb looked like all the city people did. Perfectly smooth, olive-touched skin, cheeks with color and flesh, hair done up in some elaborate sculpture of braids and bejeweled pins, a gleaming amulet around her neck. Wearing a dress of such intricately detailed fabric, it made Oscar's hands hurt just to look at it. Wolf appeared in the kitchen and immediately grabbed the packets out of Oscar's hand. Oscar gazed steadily at Wolf's chest. "The passion flower looks like walnut leaves," he whispered in his mind, though whether to convince himself or Wolf, he was not sure. Wolf eyed the contents and sniffed, then turned and went back into the shop. His whole body seemed to change as he walked through the door, as if he were transforming from beast to human. Oscar let out a breath and then suddenly caught it again. Wolf was handing the packets, not to the customer, but to Master Caleb, who was expecting raspberry leaves. Oscar had never made a mistake, not with herbs anyway, not in 5 years. Caleb took the packets in his hand. Oscar's heart thudded, but Caleb just smiled at the customer, his mouth spreading widely across his face the way it always did when there was a woman on the other side of the counter. He looked as though nothing had ever made him so happy as giving her what she wanted. The lady smiled back, and her cheeks flushed just a little. 4 envelopes of raspberry leaves, my lady, said Caleb, though, he leaned even closer, I don't see how a lady like you would need such a thing. Oh, she said, laughing like a chime, you can never be too careful. Caleb straightened and ran a hand slowly through his dark hair. The lady's hand flew to hers. I agree, Caleb said, and that's why we're here. We in the barrow serve at your pleasure. He leaned again, and his face grew serious. Whatever you need. The woman opened the package and inhaled deeply. Oscar froze. He hadn't had time to mask the smell, and surely the verbena... I just love the smell of raspberry, she said. We'll mix up some perfume for you if you want. You have such natural beauty. We could put in things that would enhance it. The lady's smile grew. I'll come back next week, she said, and then gave a little laugh. It's true what they say, isn't it? Everything is better here than anywhere else in the world. For a moment her eyes dropped on Oscar in the doorway and then moved away as if they had seen nothing at all. Wolf appeared next to Oscar and leaned in. He's quite a master, isn't he? The apprentice whispered, nodding in Caleb's direction. Oscar could only nod back. Of course he was. Wasn't that the entire point? Just before she got to the door, the lady stopped and smelled her envelopes again. And then she turned, gave Caleb one last raspberry smile, and left. I don't understand, Oscar muttered. You don't understand anything, Wolf said. Caleb is a genius. He makes all the old wizards look like little cellar boys. Oscar inwardly winced. No one talked about the wizards that way. He half expected a shelf to fall on Wolf's head. It didn't. Shelves never fell on Wolf's head when Oscar wanted them to. Caleb can do things no one's ever done before. Incredible things. Wolf looked down at Oscar, his eyes sparkling. I know. While you're in the cellar filling envelopes, he's teaching me everything. He's going to make magic great again, greater than it ever was in the era of the wizards, and I'm helping him. You. In a flash, Wolf shut his mouth, turned around, and transformed into Nice Wolf. It was his best feat of magic. Master Caleb was hanging on the doorframe, leaning in. Caleb was taller than Wolf, and there were no bones and hollows to him. Caleb filled everything. Ah, you're both here, Caleb said. Oscar, why don't you go to the gardens this afternoon? I believe we are low on supplies, particularly raspberry leaves. Oscar's stomach dropped to his feet. Caleb turned his gaze to Wolf. And Wolf, why don't you stay in the kitchen the rest of the day and sort the dried herbs? It seems like the time with them would do you some good. Wolf stiffened. Oscar gulped. Turning back to Oscar, Caleb added, "Not bad, my boy, but next time add some rose hips or another berry leaf for scent." The magician raised his eyebrows slightly. Oscar's mouth hung open. Then Caleb winked ever so quickly before heading back into the shop. Oscar exhaled. He could feel his mouth twitching into a smile. Caleb's words perched on his shoulders. "Not bad, my boy." And then the smile fled, and the words, too. Wolf turned on him, all beast. "You think you're Caleb's little pet, eh?" he snarled. "I don't know what you did, Mouse, but you will regret it." Oscar stepped back. He didn't know what he had done either, but Wolf was definitely right. Whatever it was, he would certainly regret it. And this has been a preview of The Real Boy.